Jasmine Washington watched in stunned silence as flight attendant Miles approached. "I'm sorry, but we've received a complaint," he whispered. Behind him, the blonde woman smirked victoriously. Little did she know, in 20 minutes, the CEO of the airline would be personally apologizing to Jasmine's daughter. Before we dive into this powerful story about prejudice and justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to see more stories about standing up against discrimination. Now, let's find out how a first-class flight turned into a battle for dignity and respect. The morning had started with such promise. Alana Washington, an 11-year-old prodigy with bright eyes and an even brighter mind, bounced excitedly beside her mother as they navigated through Atlanta International Airport. This wasn't just any trip. Alana had earned her spot at the National Science Competition in Washington, D.C. with a groundbreaking algorithm that could revolutionize water purification in underdeveloped countries. "Mom, do you think the judges will understand my computational approach?" Alana asked, clutching her tablet containing months of meticulous research. Her small fingers tapped nervously against the screen protector adorned with mathematical equations, a birthday gift from her science teacher. Jasmine Washington, 38 and striking in her tailored navy pantsuit, smiled down at her daughter with unmistakable pride. As a successful attorney specializing in corporate law, she'd sacrificed countless evenings and weekends to provide for Alana after her husband's death 4 years ago. This trip represented not just Alana's achievement, but validation of every sacrificial choice Jasmine had made. "Trust me, sweetheart. Once they see how your algorithm reduces purification costs by 70%, they'll be fighting to fund your research," Jasmine assured her, adjusting the small afro puffs framing her daughter's thoughtful face. For this special occasion, Jasmine had splurged on first-class tickets, Alana's first time experiencing such luxury. "You've earned this," she had told her daughter while booking. "Scientists of your caliber should travel in style." The boarding process had gone smoothly enough, though Jasmine couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the gate agent's expression when scanning their premium tickets. The woman's eyebrows had raised just slightly, her practiced smile faltering for a microsecond before recovering with professional precision. "Enjoy your flight," she'd said, her tone carrying a barely perceptible note of surprise. Similar microaggressions continued as they made their way down the jet bridge. A flight attendant greeting passengers at the aircraft door instinctively pointed them toward economy before catching herself upon seeing their boarding passes. Her hasty correction came with an overly enthusiastic, "Oh. Right this way to first class," spoken loudly enough that several nearby passengers turned to look. Alana seemed oblivious to these subtle slights, too absorbed in reviewing her presentation notes. But Jasmine noticed each one, filing them away in the mental catalog she'd been building since childhood. As a black woman who'd fought her way through law school and into a prestigious firm, she'd developed a sixth sense for detecting the almost imperceptible shifts in treatment that occurred when she entered spaces traditionally dominated by white faces. The first-class cabin gleamed with luxury, wide leather seats, personal entertainment systems, and ample legroom that made Alana gasp with delight. "This is amazing," she whispered, running her fingers over the premium amenities tucked into the seatback pocket. As they settled into their seats, 2A and 2B by the window, Jasmine became aware of a woman across the aisle watching them with thinly veiled disapproval. Katherine Winters, though Jasmine didn't yet know her name, exuded wealth from every pore of her expertly maintained 52-year-old frame. Her blonde hair was cut in an expensive bob that swung perfectly as she tilted her head to whisper something to her traveling companion. Her cream-colored silk blouse probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments, and the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the cabin lights with each dismissive gesture she made while eyeing the Washingtons. In Katherine's worldview, first class had a certain aesthetic, and the Washingtons clearly disrupted it. She'd built a successful real estate empire in Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhoods by understanding exactly what her wealthy clients wanted, and what they didn't want was diversity disrupting their carefully cultivated enclaves. This same mindset now colored her perception of who belonged in the premium cabin of Flight 1382 to Washington, D.C. The plane remained on the tarmac, departure delayed due to air traffic control issues. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, apologizing for the inconvenience and estimating a 30-minute wait before takeoff. The news sent a ripple of frustration through the cabin, passengers sighing and checking watches. The confined space, already charged with unspoken tension, grew even more uncomfortable. Unaffected by the mounting impatience around her, Alana continued chatting enthusiastically about her project. "The really cool part is how the algorithm adapts based on local water contaminants," she explained, showing her mother a complex diagram. "So communities can customize the filtration process without expensive equipment or specialized training." Jasmine nodded, genuinely impressed by her daughter's brilliance, but increasingly distracted by Katherine's obvious eavesdropping and subsequent eye-rolling. The delay stretched on, and with each passing minute, the weight of unwelcome scrutiny pressed more heavily upon them. Jasmine straightened her posture, a subtle act of defiance against the unspoken question hanging in the recycled cabin air: what were they doing in first class? Katherine Winters was not a woman accustomed to being ignored. 20 minutes into the delay, she'd already summoned the flight attendants 3 times, first for a different type of sparkling water, then to adjust the cabin temperature, and finally to complain about the inadequate selection of magazines. Each request was delivered with the expectation of immediate attention that came from a lifetime of privilege. "Excuse me," she called out again, her manicured finger pressing the call button insistently. When Miles Reynolds approached, his professional smile strained at the corners, she didn't bother lowering her voice. "I'm wondering if there's been some mistake with the seating assignments. Are those people supposed to be in first class?" Miles, 26 and only 4 months into his career with the airline, glanced uncomfortably toward the Washingtons. His training hadn't prepared him for this particular situation. "All of our passengers are seated according to their purchased tickets, ma'am," he responded diplomatically. Katherine pursed her lips. "Interesting. Times certainly have changed, haven't they?" Her companion, an older gentleman with silver hair and a permanent frown, nodded in agreement. Jasmine heard every word but chose to focus on Alana, who was now sketching improvements to her algorithm on a notepad. She'd encountered women like Katherine throughout her legal career, women who wielded their privilege like a weapon while maintaining plausible deniability about their true intentions. The tension might have remained at this simmer of passive aggression if not for the sudden turbulence that shook the still-grounded aircraft. The jolt caused Alana to bump into the back of Katherine's seat as she reached for her water bottle. Katherine reacted as though she'd been physically assaulted. "Excuse me," she snapped, whirling around to glare at the startled child. "Can you please control yourself? This is first class, not a playground." Alana froze, her eyes widening. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The plane." "Mom," Katherine interrupted, addressing Jasmine with condescending emphasis, "perhaps you could remind your daughter that there are certain expectations of behavior up here." Jasmine felt heat rising in her chest but kept her voice measured and controlled. "My daughter apologized for an accident caused by turbulence. I'm not sure what other response you're looking for." "I'm looking for appropriate first-class etiquette," Katherine replied, her gaze sliding pointedly between their seats and the economy section behind the curtain. "Some people simply aren't accustomed to these accommodations." The implication hung heavily in the air. By now, other passengers had turned to observe the exchange, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with morbid curiosity. "Are you suggesting we don't belong here?" Jasmine asked, her attorney's precision forcing Katherine's insinuation into the open. Katherine blinked, momentarily thrown by the direct challenge. "I'm simply saying there seems to be a misalignment between the passenger demographic and typical first-class standards. Perhaps your boarding passes should be double-checked." Jasmine remained outwardly composed while internally counting backward from 10, a technique that had served her well in heated courtroom exchanges. "Our boarding passes were checked at the gate, at the aircraft door, and by the flight attendant who showed us to these seats. I assure you, we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Sensing escalation, Miles stepped in. "Is there a specific concern I can address, Ms. Winters?" "Yes," Katherine said, straightening in her seat. I'd like to see their boarding passes. I find it difficult to believe. You are not entitled to see our personal travel documents, Jasmine interrupted, her professional experience kicking in. As a private citizen, you have no authority to verify other passengers' credentials. That responsibility lies exclusively with airline personnel. Miles shifted uncomfortably. She's correct, Ms. Winters. I can assure you everyone is properly seated. Catherine's face flushed with indignation. Well, they're disturbing my flight experience. The child keeps hitting my seat, and they've been talking loudly since boarding. 3 rows behind this unfolding drama, Benjamin Foster observed with increasing concern. At 44, the airline's chief operations officer had made a habit of occasionally flying incognito to experience his company's service firsthand. Dressed in simple khakis and a button-down shirt rather than his usual executive attire, he'd been anonymously assessing the crew's performance when Catherine's increasingly vocal complaints caught his attention. He remained silent, watching carefully while typing notes on his phone. The situation further deteriorated when Katherine reached for her water and, accidentally, knocked it over, sending liquid streaming toward Alana's tablet containing her competition materials. Only Jasmine's quick reflexes saved the device, though water soaked the sleeve of her suit jacket. "Oh my, how clumsy of me," Katherine said with transparent insincerity. Perhaps if the seating weren't so crowded. Alana's expression crumpled momentarily before she composed herself, dabbing at water droplets with a cocktail napkin. The calculated meanness of the act seemed to confuse her more than upset her, her brilliant mind struggling to process such deliberately unkind behavior. Jasmine locked eyes with Katherine. "I strongly suggest you reconsider your actions," she said quietly, her tone carrying the weight of someone accustomed to courtroom confrontations. "They could have consequences you haven't anticipated." For a fleeting moment, uncertainty crossed Catherine's face, but it quickly hardened back into entitlement. She had no way of knowing she had just provoked one of Atlanta's most formidable corporate attorneys, a woman who had built her career dismantling opponents who underestimated her. The captain's announcement that they were finally cleared for takeoff provided only momentary relief from the brewing conflict. As flight attendants performed final safety checks, Katherine Winters examined her wrist with sudden alarm. "My bracelet," she gasped loudly, drawing immediate attention. "My diamond tennis bracelet, it's gone." Her eyes darted accusingly toward Alana, who was absorbed in salvaging her dampened notes. "I had it on just before she started reaching around my seat." Miles Reynolds hurried over, his face etched with concern. "Are you certain it's missing, Ms. Winters? Perhaps it slipped off during the turbulence." "I'm absolutely certain," Katherine insisted, her voice rising dramatically. "It's a family heirloom worth over $20,000. I want that child's bag searched immediately." The accusation hung in the air like toxic fumes. Nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, some subtly shifting away from the Washingtons despite having witnessed nothing suspicious. It was as though Catherine's confidence in her accusation outweighed the complete lack of evidence. Jasmine placed a protective hand on Alana's shoulder. "That's an outrageous accusation. My daughter hasn't left her seat since boarding, and she certainly hasn't taken anything from you." Alana looked up, confusion giving way to hurt as she realized the nature of the allegation. "Mom, I didn't." "I know, sweetheart," Jasmine assured her, maintaining outward calm while fury built inside her. This wasn't the first time they'd faced unfounded suspicion. When Alana was 9, a store security guard had followed them through an upscale boutique, watching their every move while ignoring other shoppers. The memory of her daughter's face when she'd first recognized what was happening, that dawning understanding that some people would always see her skin color as inherently suspicious, had haunted Jasmine for months. Miles found himself in an impossible situation, trapped between company policy and his own moral compass. "Ms. Winters, are you formally accusing this young passenger of theft?" "I'm stating facts," Katherine replied icily. "My bracelet disappeared after she was touching things around my seat. Draw your own conclusions." Miles turned to Jasmine, his discomfort evident. Ma'am, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but would you and your daughter be willing to check your personal items? Just to resolve the situation quickly so we can depart. Absolutely not, Jasmine replied firmly. We will not submit to a search based on groundless accusations and racial profiling. My daughter is an 11-year-old honor student traveling to represent her school in the national science competition. She is not a thief, and I will not allow her to be treated as one. The word profiling caused several passengers to shift uneasily in their seats. A middle-aged man across the aisle cleared his throat. The lady's bracelet is missing. What's the harm in a quick check to clear things up? The harm, Jasmine responded without looking at him, is in teaching my daughter that her civil rights are conditional, and that she must prove her innocence when accused without evidence simply because of how she looks. Katherine scoffed. Always playing the race card. This has nothing to do with how she looks and everything to do with my missing property. By now, most of the first-class cabin had become unwilling spectators to the confrontation. A silver-haired woman near the front murmured agreement with Katherine, while a young couple exchanged troubled glances, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The cabin's division became increasingly apparent, most passengers instinctively siding with Katherine based on nothing more than unconscious bias and social conditioning. The wealthy-looking white woman in expensive clothes must be the victim, the black child must be the perpetrator. The narrative was familiar, comfortable, requiring no critical thought. Alana stared down at her hands, her excitement about the competition giving way to humiliation. Jasmine recognized the body language, shoulders curled inward, eyes downcast, the physical manifestation of a spirit being crushed by other people's perceptions. I don't want to make trouble, Alana whispered. Maybe I should just let them look. The suggestion broke something in Jasmine. Her daughter had done nothing wrong, yet here she was, willing to surrender her dignity to appease unfounded suspicion, a pattern too many black children learned early and carried into adulthood. No, Jasmine stated firmly, years of similar experiences crystallizing into resolution. You've done nothing wrong, and you will not be treated as if you have. She turned to Miles, switching seamlessly into her professional persona. I'd like your name and employee ID number, as well as the names of all crew members involved in this incident. I'm also formally requesting the contact information for your airline's legal department. Miles paled visibly. Ma'am, I'm just trying to resolve. You're facilitating discrimination, Jasmine interrupted. As a common carrier, this airline has a legal obligation to provide equal service to all paying passengers. My daughter and I purchased first-class tickets and have been subjected to harassment, false accusations, and disparate treatment since boarding. I'm giving you an opportunity to correct course before this escalates further. Katherine, seemingly unimpressed, raised her voice. If they won't cooperate, I want security waiting when we land. I'll file a police report for theft. From his unobtrusive position several rows back, Benjamin Foster continued observing while making notes on his phone. As COO, he recognized the potential disaster unfolding, not just a PR nightmare but a legitimate legal liability. He sent a quick text to the company's chief legal officer with a succinct summary of events and a recommendation for immediate intervention upon landing. I'll call security myself when we land, Katherine announced loudly, pulling out her phone despite the prohibition against cell phone use during taxiing. I have friends at the Washington Police Department who will take this very seriously. Miles, increasingly flustered, attempted to de-escalate. Please, everyone needs to take their seats so we can depart. We'll address this situation properly once we're airborne. I've been in my seat all along, Jasmine pointed out. The delay is coming from unfounded accusations, not from me. As the confrontation temporarily subsided, Alana leaned close to her mother. I remember studying Rosa Parks in history class, she whispered. Is this what it felt like for her? The innocent question nearly brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. In some ways, yes, she answered quietly. But remember what Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We're going to make sure it bends a little more today. The aircraft had barely reached cruising altitude when Miles Reynolds returned to their row, his expression a mixture of resignation and discomfort. He leaned down, speaking in a hushed tone intended for privacy but failing miserably in the intimate confines of the first-class cabin. "Ms. Washington, I've consulted with the lead flight attendant, and we feel it would be best if you and your daughter relocated to the economy section for the remainder of the flight," he said, studiously avoiding eye contact. "We have 2 available seats, and it would help defuse the current situation." Katherine Winters made no attempt to hide her satisfied smile, already gathering her items as though anticipating the newly vacant seats beside her. Jasmine stared at Miles in disbelief. "Let me make sure I understand correctly. My daughter and I paid for first-class tickets. We've been subjected to harassment and false accusations. And now you want us to surrender our rightful seats and accept inferior accommodations because another passenger doesn't want black people sitting near her?" Miles winced at the blunt assessment. "That's not what I'm saying. We're simply trying to." "I know exactly what you're trying to do," Jasmine interrupted, her voice controlled but carrying throughout the cabin. "You're taking the path of least resistance. It's easier to move the victims of discrimination than to address the person causing the problem." The young flight attendant glanced nervously at Katherine, who was now watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. "Please lower your voice, Ms. Washington. If you could just cooperate." "I will not cooperate with my own discrimination," Jasmine replied, maintaining her volume. "But I will document it thoroughly." Despite her objections, Miles remained firm, clearly operating under pressure from above. "I'm sorry, but I need to ask you both to gather your belongings and follow me." Alana looked up at her mother, silent tears threatening to spill. The excitement and pride she'd felt that morning had been systematically crushed, replaced by public humiliation and helplessness. Jasmine faced an impossible choice: continue resisting and potentially be removed from the flight entirely, jeopardizing Alana's competition opportunity, or submit to the indignity of being displaced because of another passenger's prejudice. With a deep breath, she nodded to Alana. "Get your things, sweetheart. But know that this isn't over." What followed was a walk of shame through the premium cabin, past rows of curious and judgmental eyes. Katherine made a show of adjusting her designer purse, loudly announcing, "Finally. Some peace and proper first-class atmosphere restored." Her companion chuckled appreciatively. "Standards must be maintained," he agreed, just loud enough to ensure the retreating Washingtons would hear. As they proceeded through the cabin, Jasmine noticed passengers' reactions ranged from uncomfortable avoidance to open curiosity. Some pretended sudden fascination with their magazines or entertainment screens. Others watched openly, several even pulling out phones to record the incident. A middle-aged man in row 5 shook his head disapprovingly. "Typical," he muttered as they passed, though whether his disapproval was directed at them or the situation remained ambiguous. Alana walked with her head held high despite the tears now rolling silently down her cheeks. Her small fingers clutched her tablet containing months of research work, the culmination of countless late nights and early mornings that had earned her this trip in the first place. The humiliation intensified as they passed through the curtain separating first class from economy. The contrast was immediate and stark: reduced legroom, narrower seats, and a completely different level of service. But worse than the physical downgrade was the symbolic message it sent to Alana: no matter her achievements or what she rightfully paid for, some spaces weren't meant for people who looked like her. The final indignity came when they reached the economy section to discover it was completely full. The aircraft had been overbooked, with not a single empty seat available. "I thought you said you had seats for us," Jasmine challenged Miles, who now looked truly panicked. "They were supposed to be available," he stammered. "There must have been some mistake with the manifest." They stood awkwardly in the aisle, blocking service and becoming an even greater spectacle. Economy passengers, initially curious about the first-class passengers being relocated, now watched the unfolding drama with undisguised interest. In row 23, Gabrielle Torres recognized the injustice unfolding before her. As a social media influencer with over 2 million followers across platforms, she specialized in documenting instances of everyday discrimination. Without hesitation, she began live streaming the incident, providing running commentary. "I'm witnessing blatant discrimination happening right now on Flight 1382, she narrated quietly into her phone. A black mother and her young daughter are being removed from their first-class seats based on what appears to be a false accusation from a white woman. The airline is complicit, and now they're stuck standing in the aisle because there are actually no economy seats available." The live stream quickly gained viewers, comments flooding in with outrage and calls for accountability. Miles led Jasmine and Alana to the galley area, away from the main cabin's prying eyes but creating an even more uncomfortable bottleneck for flight attendants trying to prepare beverage service. "I'll need to consult with the captain about the seating situation," Miles explained, sweat beading on his forehead. "Perhaps we can find accommodations in premium economy." "No," Jasmine stated flatly, her patience completely exhausted. "We will not stand for the remainder of this flight, nor will we accept any accommodation less than what we paid for. Either return us to our rightful seats in first class, or I'll add physical discrimination and breach of contract to the legal complaint I'm already preparing." With these words, she pulled out her phone and held it up. "And just so we're clear, I've been recording audio of every interaction since this situation began. I have documented evidence of the harassment, the false accusation, and now this blatant discrimination." The revelation hit Miles like a physical blow. The career he'd worked so hard to build could end before it truly began, all because he'd chosen the path of least resistance. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's situation? Would you stand your ground or try to avoid conflict? Comment number 1 if you believe she's right to firmly defend her rights, or number 2 if you think she should find a peaceful compromise. While you're sharing your thoughts, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Do you think the airline will correct this injustice, or will Jasmine need to take legal action? Let's find out what happens when they return to first class. The return to first class felt like crossing a battlefield. Miles led the way, his posture telegraphing defeat as Katherine Winters' outraged protests grew increasingly shrill. "This is unacceptable," she fumed as Jasmine and Alana reclaimed their original seats. After they refused to cooperate with a simple search. After the disruption they've caused. Jasmine remained pointedly silent, helping Alana settle back into her window seat with quiet dignity. The theater of Katherine's indignation didn't warrant engagement. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, the atmosphere tense enough to make breathing feel laborious. The flight attendants moved with exaggerated efficiency, avoiding eye contact with anyone involved in the conflict. Katherine, perhaps sensing her audience's waning sympathy, escalated dramatically. "I don't feel safe," she declared, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "My valuable property is missing, and they're being allowed to stay without even a cursory search." When this failed to generate the desired response, she abandoned all pretense of civility. Leaning across the aisle toward Jasmine, her voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "People like you are why we can't have nice things. First class used to mean something before they started letting just anyone in." The slur that followed, muttered under her breath but audible enough, shocked the cabin into complete silence. The racial epithet hung in the air like poison gas, recorded not only by Jasmine's phone but by at least 3 other passengers who had begun documenting the situation. Gabrielle Torres' live stream captured it perfectly, her subscribers witnessing the unfiltered hatred in real time. A businessman across the aisle removed his headphones, staring at Katherine with undisguised disgust. The elderly couple who had previously seemed sympathetic to Katherine now exchanged troubled glances, their allegiance visibly shifting. Even Katherine's traveling companion leaned away slightly, as though trying to create physical distance from her increasingly toxic behavior. Miles froze, horrified by the explicit racism now impossible to ignore or minimize. This had moved beyond a customer service issue into territory that no corporate policy could justify accommodating. Benjamin Foster, still observing from his unobtrusive position, made a decisive phone call, speaking too quietly for others to hear. Through it all, Alana remained composed beyond her years, though her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her tablet and notes. The excitement she'd felt that morning about presenting her research had been thoroughly extinguished, replaced by an unwelcome lesson about the world's uglier realities. The plane encountered sudden turbulence, rattling overhead bins and causing drinks to slosh. The captain's voice came over the intercom, instructing all passengers to return to their seats immediately and fasten seatbelts. The physical jostling created a strange momentary alliance, passengers united in mutual concern about safety. Catherine's older friend in the adjacent seat, a silver-haired woman who had earlier nodded along with her complaints, suddenly gasped and clutched her chest as the plane dropped sickeningly before stabilizing. "Are you all right?" Alana asked automatically, her innate compassion overriding the treatment she'd received. The woman nodded weakly, her face pale and clammy. "Just, my heart, sometimes with stress." Without hesitation, Alana offered her water bottle. "Small sips help," she advised gently. "And try breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 7, then out for 8. It helps regulate heart rhythm during panic responses." The woman followed Alana's instructions, her breathing gradually normalizing. "Thank you," she whispered, genuine gratitude replacing her previous disdain. "Are you, in medical school?" "No, ma'am," Alana replied with a small smile. "I'm 11. But I'm interested in biofeedback mechanisms. They're actually related to my water purification algorithm." The exchange wasn't lost on nearby passengers, the contrast between Alana's generosity and Catherine's behavior throwing the latter into stark relief. As the turbulence subsided, a commotion erupted from Catherine's seat. She was frantically searching through her designer handbag, muttering incoherently until she suddenly froze, her expression changing from rage to embarrassment. "My bracelet," she said in a considerably smaller voice, extracting the diamond tennis bracelet from an inner pocket of her purse. It was here all along." Rather than offering an apology, she quickly attempted to save face. "It must have fallen in when I was looking for my reading glasses." "Simple misunderstanding." Jasmine fixed her with an unwavering gaze. "A misunderstanding that led you to falsely accuse my daughter of theft, resulting in our removal from seats we paid for, public humiliation, and racist comments." "That kind of misunderstanding?" Katherine bristled. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. I never said anything about race. I would have been concerned about my bracelet regardless of who was sitting there. Yet somehow, I doubt you would have immediately accused a white child of stealing," Jasmine countered. "And you certainly wouldn't have felt entitled to demand they be removed from their seats without evidence." The truth of this statement resonated throughout the cabin. Several passengers nodded in agreement, the social dynamics having shifted decisively. Miles approached cautiously. "Ms. Winters, now that your property has been found, perhaps we can all enjoy the remainder of the flight without further incident." "Impossible," Katherine snapped, still unwilling to admit wrongdoing. "They clearly don't belong in first class. Their behavior has been completely inappropriate." The statement hung in the air like a challenge, but before Jasmine could respond, another voice entered the conversation. "Ms. Winters," Benjamin Foster said calmly, standing up and moving to the front of the cabin. "I feel compelled to point out that the only inappropriate behavior I've witnessed on this flight has been yours." Katherine blinked in confusion. "And who exactly are you to make that judgment?" "Benjamin Foster, Chief Operations Officer for this airline," he replied, showing his company ID. "I fly unannounced several times monthly to assess our service quality. Today has been particularly enlightening." The revelation sent a visible shock wave through the cabin. Miles paled to an alarming shade, while Catherine's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, resembling a fish suddenly removed from water. "I've witnessed and documented a paying customer being harassed, falsely accused of theft, subjected to racial slurs, and temporarily removed from her rightful seat without cause," Benjamin continued professionally. "None of which aligns with our company's values or policies." He turned to Jasmine and Alana with genuine regret in his expression. On behalf of the airline, I extend my sincere apologies for your experience today. I've already contacted our team on the ground in D.C. They'll be meeting us upon arrival to ensure this situation is properly addressed. For the first time since boarding, Alana's expression brightened slightly. Not because she enjoyed Katherine's discomfort, but because justice, so elusive in many such situations, appeared to be within reach. Katherine, meanwhile, had found her voice again. "This is absurd. I'm a platinum-level frequent flyer who spends thousands with your airline annually. You can't possibly be taking their side over a loyal customer." "Ms. Winters," Benjamin replied evenly, "we value all our customers equally, regardless of their status level or how frequently they fly with us. What we don't value is discriminatory behavior that violates both our policies and basic human decency." The remaining 2 hours of the flight passed in relative quiet, the first-class cabin subdued by the dramatic reversal of fortune. Katherine alternated between seething silence and furious texting, presumably contacting whoever she believed might salvage her rapidly deteriorating situation. Jasmine used the time to document everything while it remained fresh in her memory: dates, times, exact quotes, and the names of witnesses. Her legal training automatically kicking in, preparing for whatever might come next. Beside her, Alana had finally returned to reviewing her presentation notes, though her earlier enthusiasm remained dampened. The experience had left an indelible mark, not just the humiliation and accusation, but witnessing how quickly people had been willing to assume her guilt based solely on appearance. As the aircraft began its descent into Washington, D.C., Jasmine gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "For your dignity, your compassion, and your strength." Alana nodded, wisdom beyond her years evident in her solemn expression. "Mom," she replied quietly, "my algorithm is designed to make clean water accessible to everyone, regardless of where they live or what they look like. I wonder if some people need an algorithm for fairness too." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom as the plane prepared for landing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be arriving at Gate C-22 in approximately 15 minutes. We've been informed that certain passengers will need to remain seated after arrival while we address an incident that occurred during our flight. We appreciate your patience and cooperation." Katherine immediately pulled out her phone, frantically texting someone. Her previously smug expression had transformed into barely concealed panic as the reality of her situation crystallized. The public reckoning she had so confidently demanded was indeed coming, but not in the way she had anticipated. Jasmine maintained her composed demeanor while organizing the documentation she'd gathered throughout the flight. As an attorney, she understood the importance of contemporaneous notes and exact quotes. Her phone contained audio recordings of the key interactions, and she'd noted the names and seat numbers of potential witnesses. Alana sat quietly beside her, alternating between reviewing her competition materials and staring pensively out the window at the approaching capital city. The Washington Monument stood in the distance, a stark white needle against the blue sky, a symbol of American ideals that today had proven elusive in practice. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" she asked softly. "No, sweetheart," Jasmine assured her. "We did nothing wrong. Sometimes standing up for yourself feels uncomfortable, but that doesn't make it wrong." As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Jasmine noticed Gabrielle Torres a few rows behind them in economy, still discreetly live-streaming. She had positioned her phone to capture the first-class cabin while providing whispered commentary to her viewers. "We're landing now," Gabrielle narrated quietly. "The airline executive who was on board has promised intervention. The hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack is trending, with over 50,000 mentions in the past hour alone. Stay tuned to see what happens when we deplane." The social media amplification added another layer of accountability that Katherine clearly hadn't anticipated. Her pale complexion had taken on a grayish tinge as she scrolled through her phone, presumably discovering her rapidly spreading notoriety. The aircraft doors opened, and most passengers filed out normally, though many slowed to rubberneck at the unfolding drama in first class. As promised, airline representatives were waiting at the gate, not the usual ground crew, but a team of management-level staff in professional attire. Ms. Washington, Ms. Winters, and Ms. Washington's daughter, Miles announced, his voice now steady with the relief of passing responsibility upward. These representatives would like to speak with you regarding today's incident. The delegation included the station manager, a member of the corporate communications team, and most surprisingly, a distinguished-looking man who introduced himself as Marcus Sullivan, the airline CEO, who had been in D.C. for an industry conference and came immediately upon receiving Benjamin Foster's alert. Katherine attempted to seize control of the narrative immediately. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm a platinum member and have been flying exclusively with your airline for 15 years. The treatment I've received today is absolutely unacceptable." Sullivan held up a hand to pause her tirade. "Ms. Winters, I've received a preliminary report of today's events, including audio and video documentation. I believe it would be best to continue this discussion in a more private setting." They were escorted to an executive conference room away from the terminal's busy corridors. The space featured a polished wooden table, comfortable leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the airfield. Water bottles and notepads were arranged at each place, an attempt at corporate hospitality that couldn't mask the tension. Once seated, Benjamin Foster connected his phone to a display screen and played a compilation of recordings, some from his own documentation, others from passenger videos that had already been forwarded to the airline's customer relations department. The evidence was damning. Katherine's racist remarks, her false accusation, her demand that Alana and Jasmine be removed, all captured in high definition, often from multiple angles. Most disturbing was the clear audio of the racial slur she'd muttered, followed by her smug satisfaction as the Washingtons were escorted to economy. Katherine's face cycled through expressions, from indignation to shock to the dawning horror of recognition that her actions were indefensible when viewed objectively. "That's been edited," she protested weakly. "Taken out of context." "Ms. Winters, we have unedited footage from multiple sources," Sullivan replied. "The context is quite clear." Jasmine sat straight-backed and professional, her legal training evident in every measured word. "Mr. Sullivan, before we proceed further, I should inform you that I'm an attorney specializing in corporate law, with significant experience in discrimination cases. I'm not currently representing myself in that capacity, but I want to be transparent about my professional background." Sullivan nodded respectfully. "I appreciate your candor, Ms. Washington. I understand your daughter is in D.C. for a science competition." "The National Science Competition," Alana answered, her voice small but clear. "My algorithm optimizes water purification processes for communities with limited resources." "That's remarkable," Sullivan said with genuine admiration. "Especially for someone so young." Turning back to the matter at hand, he continued, "Our airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. What occurred today was a clear violation of that policy, as well as our commitment to providing equal service to all passengers." The meeting continued for nearly an hour as statements were taken from all parties. Airline representatives documented every detail, from the initial boarding experience through the false accusation and eventual reinstatement to first class. Meanwhile, outside the sealed conference room, the story was exploding across social media platforms. Gabriel Torres' live stream had been viewed over 200,000 times, with clips being shared by major news outlets and civil rights organizations. The hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack had become the top trending topic nationally. Katherine's identity had been quickly uncovered by internet sleuths, her position as CEO of Winters Luxury Properties, her community standing in Atlanta's exclusive Buckhead neighborhood, her previous donations to political candidates with questionable records on racial equity. As she checked her phone during a brief break in the proceedings, Katherine's face blanched. "My company website is being flooded with negative reviews," she whispered to her companion. "And our biggest development partner just sent an email reconsidering our relationship in light of recent events." The real estate empire she built over decades was facing an existential threat because of 20 minutes of unfiltered prejudice at 35,000 feet. For Jasmine, the rapid response from the airline was both surprising and reassuring. Too often, such incidents were minimized, the victims expected to accept half-hearted apologies and perhaps a voucher for future travel. But the presence of the CEO himself, and the thoroughness of the investigation, suggested genuine accountability might be possible. As the meeting concluded, Sullivan addressed Jasmine and Alana directly. "On behalf of our entire organization, I extend our deepest apologies for your experience today. We're taking immediate steps to ensure nothing like this happens again." To Katherine, his tone was markedly different. "Ms. Winters, your behavior today violated our passenger code of conduct in multiple ways. We'll be in contact regarding the status of your frequent flyer membership and ability to travel on our airline in the future." As they exited the conference room, reporters had already gathered in the terminal, alerted by the viral social media coverage. Microphones were thrust toward them, cameras flashing in their faces. "Ms. Washington, how do you feel about becoming the center of a national conversation about racial profiling? Ms. Winters, do you regret your actions on the flight? Alana, has this experience affected your confidence in the science competition?" Jasmine shielded her daughter from the media frenzy, declining to comment while Katherine was whisked away through a service corridor by airline staff. As they made their way to the baggage claim area, Jasmine's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, friends, and even partners at her law firm who had already seen the viral videos. The private incident had become very public, with implications neither she nor Alana had anticipated when they boarded their flight just hours earlier. The sleek conference room at airline headquarters had been hastily converted into a crisis management center. Digital screens displayed real-time social media metrics, news coverage, and stock price fluctuations. Senior executives in rumpled suits gulped coffee while public relations specialists crafted statements and damage control strategies. "The video has reached 5 million views across platforms," reported the head of social media monitoring. "Celebrity accounts are amplifying it. We're seeing coordinated calls for boycotts unless immediate action is taken." Marcus Sullivan, the CEO, paced at the head of the table. In his 30 years with the company, he'd navigated fuel crises, labor disputes, and even a minor crash landing without fatalities. But the rapidly evolving landscape of social accountability presented challenges his traditional corporate playbook hadn't prepared him for. "Show me the latest footage again," he instructed. The main screen displayed Katherine Winters' most damning moments, her false accusation, her smirk as Jasmine and Alana were escorted to economy, and most devastatingly, her clearly audible racial slur when they were returned to first class. "There's no ambiguity here," Benjamin Foster observed. "No gray area we can hide behind with corporate speak about investigating the matter or hearing all sides." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Agreed. And Ms. Washington is an attorney specializing in corporate law. If we don't handle this perfectly, we're looking at a lawsuit that would dwarf any previous discrimination case against the airline." "It's not just about avoiding litigation," interjected Amara Johnson, the recently hired chief diversity officer. "This incident has exposed a gap in our training protocols. Flight attendant Reynolds had no clear guidance for handling discrimination between passengers. He defaulted to moving the targets rather than addressing the instigator." On another screen, Katherine Winters appeared in a hastily arranged press conference outside her Atlanta office. Rather than displaying contrition, she doubled down. "My concerns were about security, not race," she insisted to the assembled reporters. "Any responsible passenger would have reported missing valuable property. The airline's response was completely disproportionate, and I'm consulting with my attorneys about a potential defamation suit." The crisis team exchanged glances. Katherine's combative stance was making their decision easier. "Pull up the background report on Alana Washington," Sullivan requested. The information appeared on screen: her perfect academic record, science competition victories, and most relevantly, details about her water purification algorithm that had caught the CEO's attention earlier. Her innovation could provide clean water to communities in developing regions at a fraction of current costs, the research analyst explained. Particularly in Africa and Southeast Asia, coincidentally, markets where we're planning major expansion over the next 5 years. Sullivan's strategic mind immediately recognized an opportunity within the crisis. So this brilliant young scientist, whose work could benefit millions in regions central to our global strategy, was accused of theft and humiliated on our aircraft based solely on her race. That's an accurate assessment, Foster confirmed. Then our response needs to be equally clear, Sullivan decided. Schedule a video conference with the Washingtons immediately. And contact Ms. Winters' attorney as well, separately, of course. An hour later, Jasmine and Alana sat before a laptop in their hotel room, facing Marcus Sullivan and his executive team. Both still wore the same clothes from their flight, their suitcases having been delayed in the chaos following their arrival. Ms. Washington, Alana, thank you for making time for this conversation, Sullivan began. After thoroughly reviewing all available evidence, including passenger recordings, our internal documentation, and flight attendant statements, we've reached some conclusions I'd like to share with you. Jasmine nodded, her attorney's instincts keeping her expression neutral despite her exhaustion. First, we acknowledge that the treatment you received on our aircraft today was discriminatory, unjustifiable, and contrary to both our stated policies and basic human dignity, Sullivan continued. There is no ambiguity in our assessment, you were targeted because of your race, and our initial response compounded that injustice. The straightforward acknowledgement, devoid of the usual corporate hedging and passive voice, surprised Jasmine. Most companies she'd encountered professionally would have hidden behind phrases like unfortunate misunderstanding or perceptions of unfair treatment. Sullivan continued, we're taking immediate actions in response. Flight attendant Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave pending completion of additional training. More significantly, we're implementing system-wide protocols for addressing passenger-to-passenger discrimination, with clear guidance that our staff must address the source of discriminatory behavior rather than relocating its targets. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. Additionally, we would like to offer tangible recognition of the distress caused today. This includes full refunds of your airfare, complimentary first-class tickets for your return journey, and a compensation package that our legal team is prepared to discuss with you. Here came the expected attempt to buy silence, Jasmine thought. But Sullivan surprised her again. However, we recognize that financial compensation alone cannot address the core issues this incident has revealed. Therefore, we're also announcing the creation of a new scholarship program for minority students in STEM fields, with Alana as our inaugural recipient and advisor if she's willing. We believe her perspective would be invaluable in shaping this initiative. Alana's eyes widened. You want my input on a scholarship program? Absolutely, Sullivan confirmed. Your experience today, combined with your evident brilliance in scientific innovation, provides a perspective our corporate boardroom simply doesn't possess. Additionally, we'd like to offer corporate sponsorship of your current water purification project, with potential implementation in regions where we operate. The offer was substantial, not just financial compensation, but a platform for Alana's work in genuine structural changes within the airline. It reflected an understanding that meaningful amends required more than simply writing a check. And what about Ms. Winters? Jasmine asked, the lawyer in her needing to understand the complete picture. Sullivan's expression hardened slightly. We've informed Ms. Winters that her platinum status has been revoked and she is banned from flying with any of our affiliated airlines indefinitely. This decision is non-negotiable and takes effect immediately. Meanwhile, across town, Katherine Winters was receiving this news from the airline's legal counsel. Her outrage quickly turned to panic as she realized the implications. You can't ban me, she protested. I have international properties to manage. Business commitments. You're free to fly with other carriers, the attorney replied coolly. Though I should mention that our decision, along with the video evidence upon which it's based, will be shared with our partner airlines as permitted under our terms of service, which you accept each time you book a flight. As Katherine's professional world unraveled, the Washingtons were presented with a comprehensive settlement offer that went far beyond financial compensation. It included not only monetary damages but structural commitments to policy changes, training programs, and ongoing initiatives aimed at preventing similar incidents. We would prefer to partner with you in making positive changes rather than meet as adversaries in court, Sullivan explained. Though we fully respect your right to pursue legal action if you feel our response is insufficient. Jasmine reviewed the offer with her professional eye. This is, surprisingly comprehensive, she admitted. I'll need time to review the details, of course. Of course, Sullivan agreed. Please take all the time you need. And regardless of your decision about the settlement, we'd be honored to sponsor Alana's participation in the science competition and offer any support she might need. As the video conference concluded, Jasmine turned to her daughter. What do you think, sweetheart? Alana considered the question with the same analytical approach she applied to scientific problems. Their offer seems genuine, she said finally. And a scholarship program could help kids like me who don't have the same opportunities as others. But what? What happens to the next person who doesn't have a lawyer for a mom or a viral video? Will they still get justice? The question demonstrated why Alana's algorithm had been so revolutionary. She saw not just immediate solutions but systemic implications. It was the same insight that had led her to develop water purification techniques that could be implemented without expensive infrastructure or specialized training. That's exactly why the policy changes might be more important than the money, Jasmine explained. They create a framework for handling these situations consistently in the future. As they talked, Jasmine's phone buzzed with news alerts. Katherine Winters was facing a tsunami of consequences beyond the airline's actions. #boycott Winters Properties was trending nationally. Major clients were publicly distancing themselves from her real estate company. The exclusive social clubs where she held memberships were reviewing their codes of conduct. The swift collapse of Katherine's carefully constructed facade of respectability demonstrated how quickly accountability could manifest in the digital age. What might once have been a private incident, forgotten after landing, had become a national conversation about privilege, prejudice, and the spaces where they intersected. For Alana, whose focus had returned to her upcoming competition presentation, the experience had provided an unexpected education in social dynamics that no classroom could have offered. Mom, she said thoughtfully, I think my algorithm needs an additional parameter to account for human factors in implementation. How so? Jasmine asked. Clean water isn't just a technical problem, Alana explained. It's also about who gets access and who doesn't. Just like that first-class seat. The solution has to address both the science and the social barriers. Her insight reflected wisdom beyond her years, an understanding that true innovation addressed not just technical challenges but the human systems surrounding them. It was precisely this holistic perspective that made her work so promising, and that the airline had recognized in their offer of partnership. As night fell over Washington, D.C., both mother and daughter finally allowed themselves to process the emotional weight of the day. The excitement of the morning felt distant, replaced by a complex mixture of vindication, exhaustion, and cautious hope that their experience might create ripples of positive change. The morning dawned crisp and clear over Washington, D.C., but Katherine Winters barely noticed the perfect spring weather as she huddled in her hotel room, watching her carefully constructed life implode in real time. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one delivering fresh evidence of her rapidly collapsing professional and social standing. Overnight, the hashtag boycott Winters Realty had generated over 300,000 posts. Her company's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments, one-star reviews, and calls for clients to take their business elsewhere. More devastating were the private messages from longtime business associates. The development company that had partnered with her on luxury condominiums for 15 years had sent a terse email. In light of recent events, we are re-evaluating our relationship with Winters Luxury Properties, effective immediately. 3 high-profile clients had already canceled listings, citing concerns about alignment with their values. Her executive assistant in Atlanta reported that protesters had gathered outside the main office with signs bearing her most damning quotes from the viral video. Katherine's fingers trembled as she dialed her attorney's number. "They can't do this to me," she insisted when he answered. "It was a private misunderstanding that's being blown completely out of proportion." I want to sue everyone, the airline, that woman and her daughter, the people recording without my consent, all of them. Her lawyer's response was not what she hoped for. Katherine, I've reviewed the footage. Multiple passengers documented you using a racial slur. You falsely accused a child of theft without evidence. The airline has clear documentation of you violating their passenger code of conduct. From a legal standpoint, your position is precarious at best. But my reputation? My business? Perhaps an apology might help mitigate the damage, he suggested cautiously. Apologize? The concept seemed foreign to Katherine, who had spent decades believing her wealth and status placed her above accountability. For what? Being concerned about my property? Miles away, in a significantly more pleasant hotel room provided by the airline, Alana was preparing for her competition presentation. The events of the previous day had temporarily derailed her preparation, but her resilient spirit had bounced back with morning light. Nervous? Jasmine asked, helping her daughter arrange research materials. A little, Alana admitted. But after yesterday, explaining my algorithm to judges doesn't seem so scary. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A delivery person stood outside with an elegant arrangement of flowers and an envelope bearing the airline's logo. Inside was a handwritten note from CEO Marcus Sullivan, wishing you every success today, Alana. Your brilliant mind and indomitable spirit represent the very best of American innovation. We're honored to support your journey. Accompanying the note was confirmation of the airline's commitment to sponsor her water purification project, along with an invitation to speak at their corporate sustainability conference later that year. Jasmine's phone rang, her law firm's managing partner calling from Atlanta. Jasmine, we've all seen the videos, he began without preamble. The executive committee met this morning and we want you to know you have our full support. Take whatever time you need with Alana, and when you return, we'd like to discuss heading up a new practice area focused on transportation discrimination cases. The firm, always strategic in identifying emerging legal trends, recognized that Jasmine's personal experience combined with her professional expertise created a unique opportunity. As the day progressed, consequences continued to unfold for all involved. Miles Reynolds, the flight attendant, received official notice of his probationary status. Rather than being terminated, he would undergo comprehensive training on recognizing and addressing discrimination, with the understanding that he would eventually help train others based on lessons learned from the incident. His initial relief at keeping his job was tempered by genuine remorse. He sent a personal email to the Washingtons, I failed to stand up for what was right when it mattered. I'm committed to ensuring no one else experiences what you did on my watch. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that your dignity in the face of injustice has profoundly changed how I'll approach my responsibilities going forward. For Alana, the day centered on her competition presentation. Standing before the judging panel of distinguished scientists and engineers, she explained her algorithm with the clarity and confidence that came naturally when discussing her passion. The key innovation isn't just in the computational efficiency, she explained, displaying complex diagrams on the projection screen. It's in designing a system that adapts to locally available materials and cultural water usage patterns. A solution that works in rural Kenya might fail in Bangladesh if we don't account for these variables. Among the audience sat Marcus Sullivan, who had rearranged his schedule to attend personally. Beside him was Benjamin Foster, who had been instrumental in documenting the flight incident. Their presence represented more than corporate damage control, it signaled genuine recognition of Alana's exceptional talent and potential contribution to global challenges. Back in Atlanta, Katherine Winters faced the business implications of her actions. An emergency board meeting of her company had been called, with several members joining remotely to distance themselves physically from the controversy. The videos speak for themselves, Katherine, the board chair stated grimly. Our company serves clients of all backgrounds. Your actions have created untenable liability and reputational damage. By afternoon, Katherine had been placed on indefinite leave from the company bearing her own name, with the board appointing interim leadership. Her carefully crafted image as a pillar of Atlanta society lay in ruins, with social invitations rescinded and philanthropic organizations quietly removing her name from donor lists. In her hotel room that evening, Katherine drafted a formal apology letter, not from genuine remorse, but on the advice of the crisis management team hastily assembled by her attorney. The carefully worded statement acknowledged regrettable behavior, while avoiding direct admission of racist intent or specific apology to the Washingtons. When the letter arrived at Jasmine's hotel, she read it with the practiced eye of someone who had reviewed countless legal non-apologies. Notice how she apologizes, if anyone was offended rather than for her actual actions, she noted to Alana. Classic non-apology apology. The media requests continued flooding in, major networks, cable news programs, morning shows, and documentary filmmakers all seeking exclusive interviews with Jasmine and Alana. Their story had struck a chord, highlighting both the persistent reality of everyday discrimination and the potential for accountability in the digital age. Jasmine fielded these requests cautiously, conscious of protecting Alana from becoming defined solely by this incident rather than by her scientific achievements. We need to consider carefully which platforms would allow us to shift the conversation toward positive change rather than just rehashing the trauma, she explained to her daughter. As they discussed the options, Alana demonstrated wisdom beyond her years. "I don't want to be just the girl who was accused on the plane," she said thoughtfully. "But if talking about what happened helps other kids like me feel less alone when it happens to them, maybe that matters too." For many viewers following the story, the most powerful aspect wasn't the public shaming of Katherine Winters, but the dignified resilience of Alana, a brilliant young scientist who refused to let someone else's prejudice define her worth or limit her aspirations. That evening, as they prepared for the competition's final judging day, Alana received notification that she had advanced to the finalist round, placing her among the top 3 contenders for the grand prize. The judges' preliminary feedback praised not only her technical innovation but the humanitarian application and scalability of her solution. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Jasmine told her daughter as they reviewed the presentation one final time, "you've already won in every way that truly matters." Alana nodded, understanding that her mother meant more than just the competition. In standing firm against injustice, in refusing to internalize someone else's prejudice, she had demonstrated a different kind of brilliance, one that couldn't be measured by algorithms or awards, but that would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The grand ballroom of the Washington Convention Center hummed with nervous energy as finalists made their last-minute preparations. Display boards showcasing innovative projects lined the perimeter, while proud parents and mentors offered words of encouragement to young scientists about to face the judges' final evaluation. Alana stood beside her presentation, no longer the shaken girl from the airplane but a poised young scientist ready to demonstrate her brilliance. Her project display had been professionally enhanced overnight by a design team provided by the airline, a small gesture of support that had touched both Washingtons deeply. "Remember to breathe," Jasmine advised, straightening Alana's carefully pressed blazer. "You know this material better than anyone in the room." The judges approached, a panel of distinguished scientists, engineers, and innovation experts who had been deliberately shielded from news coverage to ensure impartial evaluation. They were unaware of the viral incident, focused solely on scientific merit. From the back of the room, Marcus Sullivan watched with genuine interest rather than mere corporate obligation. Beside him stood Miles Reynolds, off-duty and in civilian clothes, who had requested permission to attend. His presence represented not just personal atonement but professional growth, a tangible example of the airline's commitment to transforming an ugly incident into meaningful change. Alana launched into her presentation with quiet confidence. "Access to clean water remains one of humanity's most persistent challenges," she began. "Current purification systems typically require infrastructure, specialized training, and ongoing maintenance that many communities simply cannot sustain. My algorithm changes that paradigm." With remarkable clarity, she explained the computational innovation that allowed her system to adapt to locally available materials and contamination profiles, making it implementable in regions with minimal resources. The judges leaned forward, clearly engaged by both the technical sophistication and practical applicability of her work. The key breakthrough isn't just computational efficiency, Alana explained, displaying complex simulations on her tablet. It's designing a system that respects cultural water usage patterns and local capabilities. A solution that works in rural Kenya might fail in Bangladesh if we don't account for these variables. As she concluded her presentation, one judge posed a challenging question about scalability across diverse geographical regions. Alana's response demonstrated not just technical knowledge but remarkable maturity in understanding human factors. Technical solutions fail when we ignore social context, she explained. My algorithm includes parameters for cultural adaptation, making implementation more likely to succeed across different communities. When the judges moved to the next finalist, Sullivan approached Jasmine. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he said with genuine admiration. "Her understanding of both technical and human systems is something many of my senior engineers haven't mastered." "She's had some first-hand experience with systemic failures recently," Jasmine replied with subtle pointedness. Sullivan nodded, acknowledging the reference. "Speaking of which, I wanted to personally update you. Our board unanimously approved the new scholarship program yesterday, fully funded and structured as a permanent initiative rather than a one-time gesture. We'd like to name it the Alana Washington STEM Excellence Scholarship, with your permission. The program would provide substantial financial support to minority students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with particular emphasis on innovations addressing global challenges like clean water access. Additionally, Sullivan continued, we've implemented comprehensive changes to our training protocols. Every flight attendant and customer service representative will now receive specific guidance on addressing passenger-to-passenger discrimination. The policy explicitly prohibits relocating targets of discrimination and requires direct intervention with the source of problematic behavior. These structural changes represented something far more significant than the typical corporate damage control. They were substantive reforms with potential for long-term impact across the industry. Their conversation was interrupted by Miles Reynolds, who approached with visible nervousness. "Ms. Washington," he began tentatively, "I wanted to apologize in person for how I handled the situation on the flight. I took the path of least resistance rather than doing what was right." His contrition appeared genuine, not merely fear for his job, but real understanding of how his actions had contributed to injustice. "I've been reflecting on why I automatically asked you and Alana to move rather than addressing Ms. Winters' behavior," he continued. "I'm committed to doing better and helping others learn from my mistakes." Jasmine regarded him thoughtfully. The easy response would be polite dismissal of his apology, but she recognized the potential value in engagement. "What would you do differently now?" she asked. "I would directly address discriminatory behavior rather than displacing its targets," he answered without hesitation. "I would explicitly name the problematic behavior rather than using euphemisms about customer comfort. And I would ensure that passengers understand our zero-tolerance policy applies to how they treat each other, not just their interactions with staff." His specificity suggested genuine learning rather than performative remorse. Before Jasmine could respond, an envelope was delivered to her, formal correspondence from Katherine Winters' attorney. Inside was a professionally worded apology that struck a markedly different tone from Katherine's previous statement. Legal advisors had apparently convinced her that a genuine mea culpa offered her best chance of salvaging some portion of her reputation and business interests. "I acknowledge that my behavior was inexcusable and caused significant harm," the letter stated. "My actions reflected prejudices I have failed to recognize and address. I am taking full responsibility and am committed to making amends through both personal education and financial restitution." Attached was information about a substantial donation Katherine had made to organizations promoting racial equity in education and business, along with documentation of her enrollment in intensive diversity training. The apology, while clearly shaped by legal necessity rather than moral epiphany, represented a striking reversal from Katherine's initial defiance. The swift and severe consequences to her personal and professional standing had apparently penetrated her bubble of privilege in ways that moral appeals never could. "Too little, too late?" Sullivan asked, noting Jasmine's expression as she read the letter. The timing certainly suggests convenience rather than conviction, Jasmine replied. But I'm more interested in systemic change than individual redemption. If her public humiliation helps other Katherine Winters think twice before acting on their prejudices, perhaps some good comes from it. Their conversation was interrupted by the announcement of competition results. The ballroom fell silent as the head judge approached the podium. After careful evaluation of all finalists, she began, the grand prize for innovative excellence goes to Alana Washington, for her adaptive water purification algorithm. The room erupted in applause as Alana stood momentarily frozen in disbelief before breaking into a radiant smile. Jasmine fought back tears of pride as her daughter climbed the steps to the stage to receive her award. Taking the microphone, Alana spoke with composure that belied her 11 years. "Thank you for this recognition," she began. "Clean water shouldn't be a privilege that depends on where you're born or what you look like." She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "Over the past few days, I've experienced firsthand how privilege and access can be unfairly distributed. It's taught me that technical solutions aren't enough if we don't also address the social systems that determine who benefits from innovation." Looking directly at her mother, she continued, "This award belongs to everyone who's been told they don't belong in first class, or in science competitions, or in board rooms. Your presence in those spaces isn't just about your own journey, it creates possibility for everyone coming after you." Her words resonated throughout the ballroom, drawing a standing ovation. Sullivan leaned over to Jasmine. "She's going to change the world, you know." "She already has," Jasmine replied softly. 2 days later, as they prepared to return to Atlanta, their experience contrasted dramatically with their outbound journey. Airline staff greeted them by name at check-in, personally escorting them through security and to the first-class lounge. The same airline that had been the site of their humiliation now demonstrated what true premium service could look like when delivered without bias or judgment. Benjamin Foster personally oversaw their boarding process, ensuring every detail reflected the company's commitment to making amends. "We've implemented new training protocols based directly on your experience," he explained. "Every crew member now receives specific guidance on addressing discrimination between passengers." As they settled into their first-class seats, the flight attendant, a different one from their outbound journey, demonstrated the new approach. "Ms. Washington and Ms. Washington, we're honored to have you aboard today," she said with genuine warmth. "Please let me know if there's anything you need to make your flight more comfortable." Her treatment of them wasn't special accommodation but rather the standard service every passenger deserved regardless of appearance or background, the equal dignity that had been denied on their previous flight. As the aircraft prepared for takeoff, Alana gazed out the window at the capital city receding below them. The past few days had transformed her in subtle but profound ways. She had arrived as a brilliant young scientist with a groundbreaking algorithm. She was returning as that same brilliant scientist, but with deeper understanding of the human systems her work would eventually serve. "Mom," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about adding some parameters to my algorithm." "What kind of parameters?" Jasmine asked. "Ones that account for social barriers to implementation. The best technical solution fails if people don't have equal access to it." Her insight reflected wisdom beyond her years, an understanding that true innovation addressed not just scientific challenges but the human context surrounding them. It was precisely this holistic perspective that made her work so promising, and that had earned her the competition's highest honor. As the plane climbed through clouds toward cruising altitude, mother and daughter shared a quiet moment of reflection on their journey, not just the physical travel between cities, but the more significant passage through adversity toward justice. They had experienced both the ugliness of persistent prejudice and the possibility of meaningful accountability and change. For Alana, whose future stretched bright with promise before her, the incident would become not just a painful memory but a formative lesson in standing her ground when wronged. For Jasmine, it reinforced her commitment to using her professional expertise to address systemic inequities rather than just individual cases. And for countless others following their story across social media and news outlets, the Washingtons' experience provided both validation of similar encounters and hope that speaking truth to privilege could sometimes yield tangible results. As they soared above the patchwork landscape of America below, their story continued to ripple outward, challenging assumptions, shifting conversations, and perhaps, in ways large and small, bending the moral arc of the universe ever so slightly more toward justice. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination can appear anywhere, even in spaces of luxury and privilege. Jasmine and Alana's experience highlights several important truths. First, standing up against injustice requires both courage and strategy. Jasmine's legal background gave her tools to fight back, but her moral clarity gave her the strength to use them. Second, accountability is possible when evidence is irrefutable and public pressure is applied. Katherine faced consequences not because she suddenly developed empathy, but because her actions were documented and shared widely, making her behavior impossible to dismiss or deny. Third, true change requires both individual growth and systemic reform. Miles learned personal lessons about moral courage, while the airline implemented policy changes to prevent similar incidents. Neither alone would have been sufficient. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Alana shows us that brilliance isn't just about technical innovation but understanding human systems. Her resilience in the face of humiliation and her ability to transform that experience into deeper insight about her scientific work represents the highest form of intelligence, one that combines technical expertise with emotional wisdom. In our journey toward a more just society, these are the lessons we must carry forward, documenting injustice, demanding accountability, reforming systems, and nurturing the resilient brilliance of those who have been underestimated. What discriminatory situation have you witnessed or experienced that needed to be addressed? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below to help others learn from your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to stand their ground when facing discrimination. Together, we can create a world where first-class treatment is available to everyone, regardless of appearance. Thank you for joining this important conversation.